Behind the heavy iron doors of medieval dungeons, the cries of the condemned echoed in the dark. These were not just prisons, but chambers of fear, where rulers tightened their grip on power through pain, and truth was ripped from trembling lips by cruel devices. Tonight, we descend into the shadows of the Middle Ages to uncover the secret world of torture and punishment, and the chilling logic that kept the dungeon alive. Imagine yourself in the year 1310, in the heart of a European castle. The torches flicker along stone walls, casting twisted shadows. Below in the dungeon, a prisoner kneels, shackled to the floor. His crime? Perhaps theft, perhaps heresy. Perhaps nothing at all but a whisper of accusation. The guard steps aside, and a hooded man enters. He carries no sword, only a set of tools, rusted pliers, a rope, a rack, designed not for death, but for breaking the body while leaving it alive. The man's voice is steady. Confess, and the pain will end. The dungeon was not about punishment alone. It was a theater of control, a performance of fear. For every man tortured, dozens outside learned the lesson: obedience. But what were these dungeons really like? Who were the people inside them? And why did an age obsessed with God and salvation turn pain into a ritual of justice? Tonight, we will descend into those cold corridors, past iron bars and locked gates, to uncover how medieval Europe used torture, not only as punishment, but as a weapon of silence. The Middle Ages often appear to us through the veil of myth: knights in shining armor, towering castles, heroic quests. But hidden beneath that romantic surface lay a darker reality. The dungeon. Medieval Europe was a world of hierarchy and strict control. Kings, lords, and the church demanded obedience, and those who resisted, whether criminals, rebels, or accused heretics, often found themselves in the bowels of stone fortresses. These prisons were not designed for rehabilitation. They were built for fear. Torture was both a tool of interrogation and a public symbol of power. Devices like the rack, the Iron Maiden, and the wheel were designed with cruel precision, inflicting maximum suffering while prolonging life. Each method carried its own ritual, its own grim logic. Why does this matter today? Because history reveals more than just past cruelty. It shows us how systems use fear to maintain control. It warns us of how power, unchecked, can twist justice into brutality. The dungeons were more than dark chambers. They were reflections of a society where truth was extracted by force, where human dignity could be stripped with a turn of the crank. In this episode of Forgotten Chains, we will journey through the corridors of medieval punishment, from the origins of dungeons to the infamous torture devices, from the cries of prisoners to the moral debates that followed. We will uncover how the medieval world defined justice, and how those choices still echo in our memory. The word dungeon comes from the French donjon, meaning the great tower of a castle. Originally, these were strongholds, not prisons. But as castles grew into centers of power, their lower levels became holding cells. Picture a dim, narrow space carved into stone. Moisture drips from the ceiling. The smell of rot clings to the air. Shackles hang from walls where prisoners once waited, not for trial, but for judgment already decided. By the 12th century, dungeons spread across Europe, often beneath castles or in town halls. Their purpose: to isolate the accused, to strip them of community, and to prepare them for interrogation. A guard's whisper might echo in the dark: "Few leave here whole." Torture was not random cruelty. It was carefully structured. Each device had its role. The rack. Perhaps the most infamous, it stretched the victim's body with ropes and rollers. Joints popped, muscles tore. Yet death was rarely the aim. Survival meant confession. The Iron Maiden. A coffin-shaped sarcophagus lined with spikes. Historians debate how often it was truly used, but as a symbol of terror, it thrived. Imagine being enclosed in iron, every breath pressing flesh into steel. The K. Strappado. Victims' hands were tied behind their backs, and they were hoisted by a rope, then dropped suddenly. Shoulders dislocated, bones snapped, yet life lingered. The breaking wheel. Used in public executions, it shattered bones methodically, leaving the condemned displayed as a warning. The chair of torture. A seat covered in spikes. Victims strapped. Down, left to bleed slowly, reminded that pain could be a throne. Each device whispered the same message. Truth belongs not to words, but to screams. Who ended up in these dungeons? The list is long. Thieves and murderers were common, but so were beggars, rebels, and debtors. Most haunting were those accused of heresy or witchcraft. Imagine a woman accused of consorting with the devil. She insists on her innocence. But the inquisitor demands proof. Bound to the rack, she cries, "I am faithful." With each turn of the wheel, her voice breaks. Finally, her words change. "Yes, I confess." Confessions under torture were prized as truth, even when everyone knew they were lies. The dungeon transformed denial into guilt, innocence into crime. And yet, not all voices broke. Chronicles tell of prisoners who refused to speak, even as their bodies failed. Their silence, though punished, carried defiance. Torture was never only private. Many punishments were staged before crowds. Public squares filled with villagers summoned to watch justice unfold. The condemned were paraded, bound, sometimes beaten. The executioner became a grim actor, his tools the props of fear. The wheel creaked. Flames licked the pyre. A crowd gasped as bones cracked. Children were told, "See this and obey." The dungeon and the square worked together. Pain in the dark created fear in the light. Together, they upheld a fragile order where kings ruled and peasants obeyed. But even in the Middle Ages, not all accepted torture. Some church scholars argued, if confession comes from pain, is it true at all? Others saw cruelty as unchristian, unworthy of God's justice. By the 14th century, legal thinkers began questioning the reliability of torture. By the 18th century, with the Enlightenment, the tide turned. Philosophers like Cesare Beccaria denounced torture as both barbaric and ineffective. Slowly, dungeons emptied. Torture devices gathered dust. Yet the memory remained. Even today, the language of torture lingers in our imagination. The dungeon has become a symbol in novels, films, and games. But beneath that fantasy lies truth. Real people, real suffering, real cries in the dark. And the lesson is sobering. Systems of power, when unchecked, will justify cruelty in the name of order. They will turn human bodies into tools, pain into policy. The medieval dungeon may be centuries behind us, but the temptation to rule through fear is not. As we leave, the dungeon's shadows, what remains are the echoes, the cries of those whose pain was turned into performance, whose humanity was reduced to confession. Medieval torture was not simply cruelty, it was a system, a belief that order could be maintained by breaking the body, that truth could be forced from screams. And in that system, we see the danger of unchecked power. What strikes us most today is not only the devices, the rack, the wheel, the spikes, but the logic that justified them. Each tool was created not by monsters, but by men convinced they were serving justice. That is the warning. Cruelty often wears the mask of righteousness. Yet, from this darkness also rises a lesson in resilience. Many resisted. Many spoke truth, even as pain consumed them. Their voices, though silenced, remind us that dignity endures even in the harshest of prisons. The dungeon is a relic, but its memory forces us to ask, how do we define justice today? Do we still allow fear to shape our systems? Do we still listen to power over truth? History does not repeat itself exactly, but it rhymes. And the Dungeons rhyme warns us that freedom and justice require vigilance, empathy, and the refusal to let cruelty become law. If this journey into the depths of medieval dungeons has opened your eyes, don't let the story end here. Share this video so others can hear the voices history tried to silence. Subscribe to Forgotten Chains for more hidden histories, tales of courage, suffering, and survival that shaped the world we live in today. Ring the bell so you won't miss our next descent into the past. And we want to hear from you. Which device or story shocked you the most? What do you think it teaches us about justice today? Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Because history's chains still rattle in our memory, and the more we remember, the stronger we become.